very arbitrary as to the difference between the breaking of the rules and the actual penalty for it.
What will the tenancy tribunals do now with these cases, do you think?
Well, we hope that the principal tenancy adjudicator will give a practice note to adjudicators to say how the High Court ruling should now be implemented. Basically, the District Court has said that the High Court ruling was advisory rather than a binding ruling, which means it gives them the power to be able to use the whole of the RTA rather than that just Section 137. And that should be good. It means that they need to be more balanced now, or they can be more balanced in what they do. So if the breach is of a very technical nature, it's doubtful they'll probably give any of the rent back. But if it is a terrible property and it is unsafe or unsanitary or something like that, then they can actually still award the rent to go back to the tenant.
It did offer tenants a degree of protection. This was the whole idea, wasn't it? From living in genuinely shoddy or unhealthy circumstances.
Yeah, it did. The only thing is that the government has actually already put items into the Residential Tenancies Act to say what those penalties should be. Yeah. And so these penalties were sometimes 20 times higher than what the government had said the penalty should be. There are things called damages that they can award. It's like a fine, but not quite like a fine, but similar. And these things were way higher than that for very small things. And as I said before, the arbitrary nature of it, where you could have a minor breach and yet the penalty would be enormous, was seen as being problematic.
So a sigh of relief heard around the country from your members, Andrew.
An enormous... I've never had as many emails coming in saying thank you, actually.
Every landlord in Dunedin.
That's right. Andrew King.
All around the country, that was the thing. There was one we went to a few weeks ago where it was $49,000 for a minor breach. And it hasn't actually gone through yet, but it could well do. This may stop it now, which will be fantastic for those people.
49,000?
Yeah.
That's a long-term tenancy.
It was just over 2 years, I think.
Wow. Okay, and that case hasn't come up yet. Andrew, thank you. Andrew King from the New Zealand Property Investors. The Queen's appointed the Duke of Edinburgh Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, honouring him for services to the Sovereign on the occasion of the 70th wedding anniversary. Their union has been a beacon of stability, says The Times, and Prince Philip received a full celebratory peal of the bells at Westminster Abbey, lasting an exciting 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Sorry.
Does their union mean much to you? I know you were compared to Prince Philip.
I've compared myself to Prince Philip.
Yes, right, you compared yourself to Prince
Not the racist Prince Philip, the other more sort of the clumsy version. That can we just to talk about this title, the Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order for services to the Sovereign? It sounds like something that you would pick up after a successful tournament of Quidditch on Harry Potter. It's just such a
or at least jousting, yes,
appropriate name. And then the 3 hours and 20 minutes of the pealing of the bells.
It's
glorious.
I wonder what sort of sash he gets for that. He must have a sash.
The thing is, you've got to maintain the formality, don't you, or else the institution
crumbles.
Crumbles, Sandy.
Crumbles. Like a good Western song. Crumbles. Your dog leaves you, the ute goes, and your good Prince Philip bows out without a title.
You get goosebumps and away you go.
Exactly.
Well, we're close to crumble moment for the day ourselves. Clark Gayford, nice to see you. Sandy Hodge, you too. Thank you both for your company. And thanks, everybody. We're back tomorrow.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, the chair of the Waikato DHB was warned against hiring Nigel Murray as CEO, but said he'd keep an eye on him. Also tonight, another NCEA maths exam that seems to have made a meal out of pie. Sorry about that. Should Auckland Council staff travel business class when they go overseas? Because they are, to the tune of $500,000 for 63 business class flights. Brace yourselves, I'm about to say 2 words banned on a posh subdivision for rent. Christchurch's Metro Sports facility very late and now much more expensive. How does a $75 million budget blowout sound? And some library brilliance from Picton. All of that and more coming up after Anna with the news.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The number of transport agency staff earning more than $100,000 leapt by 33% in just 1 year. And the New Zealand Initiative think tank says the agency needs to give the public a better explanation for the boom. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
In the 2015-16 financial year, the number of staff at the transport agency who were earning more than $100,000 rocketed by 33%. 555 staff were earning six-figure salaries, up from 418 the year before. In a statement, the agency says it hired 70 new staff that year and also changed the way it calculates salary increases, lifting more staff above the $100,000 threshold. The New Zealand Initiative says that still doesn't account for the 33% jump and says the agency should be more transparent. The Taxpayers Union says the increase is quite extraordinary. From Parliament, Benedict Collins.
Christchurch's planned swimming and sports facility is facing a $75 million budget blowout, and the rebuild minister is ordering an urgent rethink. Megan Wood says the blowout is largely due to a price increase by the preferred design and build contractor. The minister has told the government rebuild organisation, Rotorua, to design the facility in-house and prepare a build-only contract. Dr Woods says officials will also look into the benefits of combining part or all of the facility with a new stadium also being planned for Christchurch.
Let's actually use this time to look at all the things that are on the table and available for Canterbury to deliver the very best facilities. And I think that we should definitely be looking at other creative solutions.
Dr Woods says the review will be done by March. A former Labour MP, Sue Moroney, says she warned the Waikato District Health Board chairman about Nigel Murray before he was hired. Documents released by the DHB show that Dr Murray spent $218,000 in his 3 years there. He resigned early last month. The chair, Bob Simcock, said yesterday he was not responsible for travel he had not been given information about. But Ms Moroney told Checkpoint she warned Mr Simcock in 2014 not to employ Dr Murray, and he must now take responsibility. A mining project planned near Westport has been given the green light. The West Coast Regional Council says consent has been granted, subject to conditions for the Te Kuha mining project on the West Coast. The Greenfields open cast coal mine will cover 144 hectares, with 12 hectares on conservation estate. The joint application between the West Coast Regional Council and the Buller District Council attracted 744 submissions. Forest and Bird said the mine would remove a mountain top visible from Westport and push threatened species closer to extinction. The Council Chief Executive Mike Meehan says the process has been robust. The decision is subject to a 15-day appeal period. Auckland Council officials are recommending one of the cheaper options for an America's Cup village, building 8 team bases across the Wynyard, Halsey Street and Hobson Wharves. The $120 million plan would add wharf space but make the smallest impact on the harbour. Our Auckland correspondent Todd Niall reports.
The Cup defender Team New Zealand prefers a more expensive extension of Halsey Street Wharf, but is understood to be comfortable with the recommended option. Councillors are being advised to leave a final vote till mid-December after more details are sorted. An economic benefit forecast shows the base option may reduce the potential projected injection into Auckland's economy by almost $250 million. The plan houses only 8 teams and adds 10 superyacht berths, while 12 teams and almost 160 superyacht visits would be needed to deliver the top-end benefit of nearly $1 billion. Tui Tamaki Makoro, ko Todd Niall tēnei.
More than 30 teachers are drafting a complaint about Monday's Level 1 NCEA maths exam. The teachers say the exam included questions that were too difficult or poorly worded, and 2 that tested the same area of knowledge. The teacher organising the letter, Jake Wills from Kapiti College, says there were too many problems.
The people who were sitting the exam obviously haven't sat down and thought about the consequences of their decisions for all of the people that could be taking this exam. And I guess that's what really it comes down to, is we want to be sitting exams where students can demonstrate everything that they can know rather than putting unnecessary hurdles in place for them.
Jake Wills. Then the Qualifications Authority says it has confidence in the exam and the people who set it. It's 5:05. To sport, and the former America's Cup skipper Chris Dixon says the decision to opt for foiling mono hulls for the next America's Cup will make the event more relevant to regular sailors. Team New Zealand has announced the design for the 2021 event will be AC-75 foiling mono hulls rather than the catamarans of the past few events. The team's design coordinator Dan Bernasconi says feedback from other syndicates recommended a return to mono hulls, and Dixon agrees.
99% of the boats in the world are monohull, of sailing yachts, of cruising yachts, of pleasure yachts. Monohulls are the practical boats out there. They always have been. The whole world knows monohulls. Every yacht club, every sailor in the world knows monohulls, and it will encourage teams to compete.
Chris Dixon. The New Zealand Warriors have signed standoff Blake Green for the next 3 years. Manly released the 31-year-old 5/8 yesterday after securing disgruntled Roosters halfback Mitchell Pearce. Green becomes the Warriors' 8th new signing for 2018. The Australia rugby coach Michael Cheika is facing an investigation over his comments and conduct after he reacted angrily to several key decisions that went against his side during the weekend's loss to England at Twickenham. World Rugby has referred Cheika to its disciplinary panel after he walked down the touchline to protest the decisions and exchanged words with spectators. And that's the news.
Re-entering Pike River Mine.
It's not insurmountable. The mine can be made safe for people to go back down.
Getting to the bottom of rate increases.
If you think of the budget like a pie, and that's how much we're going to collect from rates, that pie doesn't get any bigger because of revaluation.
And unveiling the new America's Cup boat design.
It's a completely new concept of boat, which we're pretty excited about.
Fresh solutions on Morning Report. Guy Espiner and Philippa Tolley, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, are people with disabilities being left out of a tight rental market? And after 10, Andy Weir, the self-professed space nerd and author of Artemis, the follow-up to the global hits The Martian. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taiape. Fine apart from a few isolated showers. Waitomo to Horowhenua and the Kapiti Coast, fine weather. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy and a few light showers clearing tomorrow evening. Wellington and Wairarapa mostly fine with some isolated light showers tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, fine spells, a few light showers mainly about the ranges. Westland and Fiordland, fine spells, isolated showers for you, developing around the ranges in the afternoon and evening. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland, mainly fine but cloudy periods near the coast. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with a few showers. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. The Waikato DHB next, and its expensive and now former CEO. We hear from the politician who warned the board's chair against hiring him. But we begin tonight in Christchurch, where the rebuild minister has revealed the city's planned swimming and sports facility is facing a $75 million budget blowout, and she's ordering an urgent rethink. Announced with great fanfare by John Key and Jerry Brownlee in 2012, the Metro Sports Facility was part of the blueprint for rebuilding Christchurch, one of the anchor projects in the city's quake recovery plan. It was initially due to open in 2016. Yes, that's last year, but construction hasn't even started yet. Now Megan Woods is asking officials to look into whether the sports centre could be merged with the new stadium planned for the city, creating one super facility. What's going on here? Why is it taking so long? And why is it now so expensive? Maya Burry reports.
The Rebuild Minister, Megan Woods, says since taking up office, she's been advised the project, which incorporates a 50-metre swimming pool, netball courts and a gym, is $75 million over its budget of $246 million. Ms Woods says this is due to a price increase by the preferred contractor, Lees Cockram Joint Venture, for the design and build of the facility and a significant risk escalation component. She says she's been forced to take action.
We need plans for our city's anchor projects that are realistic, affordable and offer good value for money. A $75 million budget blowout on a project that is already years behind schedule is an undue burden on taxpayers and ratepayers.
To rein in costs, Ms Woods has told the government rebuild organisation Waikato to terminate the agreement with Lee's Cochrane joint venture and to instead design the facility in-house and prepare a build-only contract. Waikato's chief executive, Albert Brantley, says it ran into trouble with the pricing negotiations in July, but they had not been able to cancel the contract agreement any sooner than now.
I think you have to be realistic. We were in a period where we were coming up into the election. We get caught in provisions where major decisions, you tend not to make those. So we lengthened the period that we would have normally taken to do something would have been done much shorter.
Megan Woods says while Waikato is carrying out the design work, she is also asking officials to look into the benefits of combining part or all of the facility with a new stadium that's also being planned for Christchurch. Once this review is completed, a decision can be made on whether to proceed with the tender process for a facility as currently planned, with an expected opening date of 2021, or to begin the development of a combined facility. Ms Woods says whatever the end result is, she wants people to be happy with it.
Look, one of the commitments I've made to the sporting codes, who I have spoken with in the lead up to this announcement, is that they will be at the table. I want to make sure that we get the facilities that Canterbury needs and that the sporting codes need to be such a part of that discussion. This is about making sure that we can get facilities that work for the people of Canterbury.
Under a cost-sharing agreement, the Christchurch City Council has committed up to $147 million towards the sports facility, with the rest covered by central government. The Christchurch Mayor, Leanne Dalzell, hopes the opportunity for a rethink will help in reducing overall costs while providing the city with the sporting and events infrastructure it needs.
I mean, our sporting infrastructure was severely damaged in the earthquakes, and we need to take this moment in time just to see whether there are better ways of delivering more for Christchurch and for the Canterbury region in a faster space of time.
Megan Woods says they will make a decision on which option to proceed with after the review is completed in March next year. For Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
And we are trying to get hold of former Earthquake Recovery Minister Jerry Brownlee. It's 5:12. We turn now to the controversial appointment and departure of the former Waikato DHB CEO, Nigel Murray. Dr Murray, who was being paid $560,000 per annum and who spent half of last year travelling, resigned in early October following concerns over his spending. DHB sources have told Checkpoint that questions were being raised about Dr Murray's behaviour long before he resigned. But a Hamilton-based Labour MP between 2005 and 2017 told us she warned the DHB that Dr Murray was a risk before he was even hired. Last night, DHB Chair Bob Simcock told us he couldn't have acted against his CEO because he simply didn't know what he was doing. But former List MP Sue Moroney, who was based in Hamilton, of course, said she warned Bob Simcock about Nigel Murray, and she wasn't alone.
Well, I met with Bob Simcock early in June 2014 because there had been media speculation that Nigel Murray was the front runner for the DHB's CEO role. And I just decided as a community leader that I had some real misgivings about that, and so it was important for me to share that with the chair of the DHB. So I met privately with Bob Simcock and shared my views with him. I was concerned because I'd been working in the health sector when Nigel Murray was employed as the CEO of the Southland DHB, and I really recall the acrimonious negotiations that he led over that period of time. And I also had recalled that he'd had quite a sudden departure from the Southland DHB that involved some concerns around the fact that the DHB thought he was overseas doing some work on their behalf, and it transpired that he was over there having a job interview for his next career prospects. So I shared those issues with Bob Simcock.
And he was chairman of the board at that stage, wasn't he? He was well and truly chairman of the board by then. What did he say back to you?
Well, he agreed that, because I was saying to him, look, Bob, I think this is an issue around your credibility because this is such a controversial appointment. And he agreed that his credibility was at stake, and he assured me that he'd be keeping a close eye on Nigel Murray. He said to me that he was convinced that Nigel Murray was the best person for the job, that he had double-checked his referees, and that the referees that Nigel Murray had provided for him were glowing in their praise of him, and that he was going to proceed with the appointment. So, you know, at that point we had to agree to disagree, and I felt that I had an assurance from Bob Simcock that he understood how controversial this appointment was, and that he would be keeping a very close eye on Dr. Murray.
Do you remember him saying that? Do you remember the chairman of the board, Bob Simcock, telling you he would keep a very close eye on Nigel Murray?
Yes, he gave me that assurance in that meeting.
OK, can we play you a grab of Karen Brown, who is our health correspondent, talking to Bob Simcock yesterday about how Bob Simcock seems not to have been keeping as close an eye on Mr Murray as he promised you he would keep. Could you listen to this?
Shouldn't you have been more closely in touch with him? That was your primary responsibility and no one else, wasn't it?
Well, actually, it's his primary responsibility. But certainly I was aware of what I was authorising. It's very difficult for me as a chair to be aware of things that are not put in front of me. Certainly he didn't comply with policies and processes that we would expect him to comply with.
And you were the one responsible?
No, he's the one responsible.
But you should have picked it up as the chair of the DHB.
Well, you're saying I should pick it up. You need to explain to me how I would do that. In fact, if there are no documents that I see that indicate the problem.
Is that consistent, what Bob Simcock was saying to Karen Brown there, with the assurances he gave you about the eye he would keep on Nigel Murray?
That bears no resemblance to the discussion that I had with Chair Simcock at that time, where I was impressing upon him his responsibility in making that appointment, and he was agreeing that it was a controversial appointment and that his credibility was at stake over how that all worked out. And that's the reason why he said to me that it was in his interests, in Bob Simcock's interests, to be keeping a very close eye on Nigel Murray.
So what are we to make of all of this? Nigel Murray going in the circumstances in which he went, the $150,000 spent on the investigation into his behaviour, the money that was just inappropriately spent, and money is a scarce resource in every DHB. And Mr Simcock's suggestion now that there is simply no way he could have known. What are we to make of all of this?
Well, it was Bob Simcock's job to know about what was going on. It's really frustrating for me to learn subsequently that within months of Bob Simcock and I having that conversation, that Nigel Murray was already flouting the policies and procedures of the DHB by claiming more in transfer accommodation costs than what he was entitled to do. I was also raising in Health Select Committee hearings of the financial review performance of the DHB. I was raising ongoing issues with regard to Nigel Murray's salary increases that had... You
were raising this in Select Committee?
Yes. So certainly in the review of the 2015-16 financial review of the DHB, I did quite a range of questions about quite a substantial increase in Nigel Murray's salary in his second year of employment with the DHB. And I think that some of those things need to be revisited as well, because one of the reasons given for that more than $100,000 increase in Nigel Murray's salary was his cashing up of annual leave to the tune of $21,000. Now, I think we're in a situation where Bob Simcock says he doesn't know how often Nigel Murray was out of the country. I don't think that he knows how much annual leave he was actually taking, and was he entitled to have that $21,000 worth of annual leave cashed up.
We have looked back on that Health Committee, and that matter was indeed discussed. $21,000 was indeed paid out in untaken annual leave. We're going to try and find out more about that, because on the face of it, we're staggered that Dr Murray could have had any annual leave available to him. You will have heard Sue Moroney say that she received assurances from Bob Simcock that Dr Murray had provided really strong referees. We wanted to know what those referees were, who they were and what they were saying. So we contacted the DHB and asked for them. We would decline that information on the grounds that the public interest is outweighed by the need to withhold information that is subject to an obligation of confidence. We are simply not persuaded by that refusal, and we will be appealing it immediately to the Ombudsman. This is in the public interest, we think. It is 20 minutes past 5. Should local body politicians and bureaucrats travel business class? Should local body politicians in a city with major new projects to pay for, including light rail, for example, a regional fuel tax on the way, and a mayor who pledged to keep rate rises an average of 2.5% by finding cost savings within the council, travel business class? Well, no, says one of them. $500,000 has, however, been spent on 63 return business class flights since the beginning of last year, and that doesn't include all the council's operations. John Watson, who represents the Albany ward on Auckland's North Shore and who's never had a foreign trip as a councillor, said he hadn't registered just how expensive they were until he saw them listed.
Well, we've seen like individual business class flights that are like small fortunes, you know, $10,000, $12,000, $14,000, $18,000 to Asia, to London. So that's the kind of range that they're coming in at, which of course is about 4 to 8 times more expensive than an economy fare of the same destination.
So you've seen one person spending $18,000 to travel to London?
Yes. Yep. There's a printout of all the various places around the world that Auckland Council staff and politicians have been to, and they're very expensive.
And what's your response to that expense? Do you think it's excessive?
Yes, it is, John. I think it's kind of embarrassing, really. This comes out every year. Someone does a information request and it's indefensible. Everyone knows that if you're travelling on your own, there's no way in the world you would be paying that sort of money. So why is it suddenly okay when it's on the public purse?
If we look at the council, you say it's indefensible. If we look at the council's defence for it, it is that if you are travelling for longer than 8 hours and you are working within 24 hours of your arrival, you get to go business class. Isn't it a good thing if you are working almost immediately after you land that you arrive refreshed and ready to go?
Well, my answer to that, John, would be, well, why wouldn't you just go a day earlier then if that was the case? Spend an extra couple of $100 on a night's accommodation rather than $10,000, $12,000, $16,000 extra just on travelling business class. So that doesn't really wash with me.
Is this going to be debated? Is this something that you can put up for consideration?
Well, we put it up for the meeting today, and it was turned down, which was really disappointing. So we're now in a position where we're going to pursue it in whatever way we can. We know there's kind of widespread public revulsion at this kind of corporate excess, not just with council but with other public institutions. So we've been given an undertaking that there is some sort of review, but to be honest, this has been going on since the inception of the super city. So if they were going to do anything, they would have done it long before now.
John Watson from the Albany ward on Auckland's North Shore. Now, Auckland Council's Chief Executive Stephen Town confirmed that 63 return business class flights have been taken since the start of last year. In a statement, he said he declined the motion John Watson was talking about because the issue is already being investigated, and I quote, as a wider piece of work on expenditure, and a report is due back by March of next year. Feedback already coming in. There was a lot of it last night on Bob Simcock, the Waikato DHB and Nigel Murray. Hi, John. The new Labour-led government said they'd asked for all DHB chairs to hand in their resignation letters. I assume there's now no need for Health Minister David Clark to bother with Bob Simcock's chairs. John Rowe from Kandala. Thank you, John, and thank you all for your feedback. You can text us on 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz, and we are, of course, on Twitter and on Facebook. 24 minutes past 5, coming up on Checkpoint. Why new Waiariki MP Tamati Coffey was uninvited to a gala event in Rotorua. Rather strange affair, this one. ACC pledges a lump sum payment to a man whose prostate cancer spread whilst his treatment was delayed by the Southern DHB, and much more coming up between now and 6 o'clock. But first, some maths teachers are losing confidence in the people who set NCEA maths exams after problems with this year's Level 1 papers. A group of more than 30 teachers is drafting a letter of complaint to the Qualifications Authority, saying some questions were too hard or poorly worded, and two tested the same area of knowledge. Now, this complaint, of course, follows problems with two of last year's maths exams. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
These Year 11 students went into Monday's maths exam expecting to do well, but came out worried they hadn't.
I felt prepared going in, and then I opened the exam booklet and had no clue where to start.
We didn't know how to answer the questions because they just didn't have enough evidence in them.
People with an amazing ability couldn't really show that because the questions were just nothing that they'd been able to prepare for.
Some of the questions, they were quite hard to answer because there wasn't enough evidence in them.
It was a bit of a shock, really.
Teachers are not happy either, and some are listing the problems in the exam in a joint letter. Among them is Lucy Edmonds from Auckland's Green Bay High School. She says some of the questions had no place in a Level 1 exam, and one was very poorly worded.
It is incredibly verbose, and within our department there were 3 highly experienced teachers from the point of view of doing Level 2 calculus, and we all came to different conclusions based on different assumptions from the context.
Lucy Edmonds says teachers are frustrated and they're not happy with the team that sets the exams. She says teachers need better guidance about what sort of things the exams will cover.
We don't actually have enough time within our very, very busy curriculum to do all of the internals and prepare the students for sometimes 3 externals and not have a very clear indication of what could actually be in the content of the exam. We don't need to know the questions, but more clarity on the content.
The Qualifications Authority says it's confident about the exam and the people that set it. It says teachers were told in advance about likely changes to the format of some questions and the areas that would be tested. But the teacher organising the letter of complaint, Jake Wills from Kapiti College, says that's not what teachers are complaining about.
The people who are sitting the exam obviously haven't sat down and thought about the consequences of their decisions for all of the people that could be taking this exam. And I guess that's what really it comes down to, is we want to be setting exams where students can demonstrate everything that they can know rather than putting unnecessary hurdles in place for them.
Jake Wills says one example is a question that included red text on a yellow background, which some students would find hard to read. He says exams like yesterday's are not helpful.
Mathematics is one of the subjects that in New Zealand has in the past had a bad rap. Students are told that maths is a difficult subject or it's hard, whereas it doesn't have to be any of those things. And having these exams which throw students off doesn't help our goal of trying to make maths a thing that is enjoyable and interesting for these students.
The next maths exams are Level 3 Calculus on Thursday, followed by Level 2 Maths and Statistics on Friday. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
5:27. Let's go to Rotorua, where organisers of a gala awards event have been left slightly red-faced after a new MP was uninvited because they didn't want to upset an outgoing MP. Now, Checkpoint understands Waiariki MP Tamati Coffey, recently elected for Labour, of course, was uninvited from their Te Arawa Awards night on September 29 because organisers didn't want to upset the newly ousted Māori Party leader, Te Rotorua Flavel. But as Zach Fleming reports, neither ended up turning up.
Planning for the Te Arawa Awards in Rotorua starts 11 months out. The annual sit-down gala honours achievements in sport, cultural activities, services to the community and academia in the Bay of Plenty. Actor Cliff Curtis presented an award this year. But when Labour's Tamati Coffey beat the Māori Party's Te Rotorua Flavel and Waiariki at the election, he threw a spanner in the works, a big one.
People were pretty geared up about it.
Were there threats of violence if Tamati attended?
No, but it was just a concern that people weren't sure what the reaction might be.
That's Stuart Edwards, chair of the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust. Tamati Coffey is the deputy chair. The trust sponsors the Te Arawa Awards every year to the tune of $5,000, so naturally its chair and deputy chair and other staff would attend. But when Tamati Coffey became Waiariki's MP just 6 days out from the event, he was uninvited. Uninvited by Peri Marks, the chair of Te Papa Takaro o Te Arawa, the charity that runs the event. When Mr Coffey signalled he might go regardless, Mr Marks then asked Mr Edwards to ask Mr Coffey not to go.
So you were asked by Petty Marks to ask Tamati not to attend. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
But Mr Marks didn't want to talk about it today.
Did you want Tamati Coffey to be uninvited from the awards?
No comment.
Did you ask for Tamati to be uninvited from the awards?
No comment.
Why no comment?
I told you already, the conversation is between me and Tamati, not anybody else, and that includes anybody who wants to talk about it.
Will Tamati be invited to the awards next year?
I can't actually say.
Mr Coffey wouldn't be interviewed, but Checkpoint understands there was animosity towards him from some of the attendees. And Mr Edwards says that's because Mr Flaville usually attended and had a lot of local support.
The people who were running the show just were unsure that they could manage the evening without potential embarrassment to all concerned.
And in solidarity, Mr Edwards didn't go either.
Out of respect for a fellow trustee, so it just made it clear that we accepted that the grant was for the young people, but that I had then the job of supporting the deputy chair by our non-attendance. And that point was made.
So on Saturday, September the 29th, the awards went off without a hitch. But not necessarily because Tamati Coffey didn't go. After all the kerfuffle, Te Uraroa Flaville didn't attend either. Stuart Edwards says the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust sponsorship of the Te Arawa Awards will now go up for review. But it's likely the sponsorship will continue despite the snub.
The principle of this is that it's purely and simply a way of recognising the efforts of the young people, the rangatahi of our area, and that's of paramount importance.
And we spoke to Te Uraroa Flaville late this afternoon. He said he had nothing to do with Tamati Coffey's uninvitation, and he wouldn't have minded if he went.
Well, I didn't even know that he was invited or wasn't uninvited, so, who people invite, that's their business, but I had no idea. I got no idea who was invited, who wasn't invited, so it's out of my hands.
Why didn't you go?
I can't recall, to be frank, but probably just under the circumstances. It was having been invited as the MP in the past and not being the MP. I think the circumstances were that I just probably wasn't in the right space, having just come out of the election. And I think I did tender my apology, but I can't be sure about that.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
It's 6:27. We're hearing from parents, teachers and students horrified by the NCEA maths exam today. Thank you for your feedback. Coming up on the program, an explosion in six-figure salaries at the Transport Agency. Residents of a flash New Plymouth subdivision ban for rent signs. Must be lowering the tone. And Picton librarians come up with a really clever way of cutting back on moving costs. It's genius. We really liked it. Nona has got business news next. But first, Anna with the headlines.
Thanks, Sean. The Taxpayers Union is describing a jump in the number of transport agency staff earning more than $100,000 as quite extraordinary. In the 2015-2016 financial year, 555 staff earned six-figure salaries, up from 418 staff the year before. The agency says it hired 70 new staff that year and also changed the way it calculates salary increases, lifting more staff above the 100,000 threshold. The think tank, the New Zealand Initiative, says that doesn't account for the rise. A former Labour MP, Sue Moroney, has told Checkpoint she warned the Waikato District Health Board chairman about Nigel Murray before he was hired. Documents released by the DHB show that Dr Murray, the former chief executive, spent $218,000 in expenses in his 3 years there. Christchurch's planned swimming and sports facility is facing a $75 million budget blowout, and the rebuild minister is ordering an urgent rethink. Megan Wood says the blowout is largely due to a price increase by the preferred design and build contractor. A mining project planned on the west coast near Westport has been given the green light. The West Coast Regional Council and Buller District Council have granted resource consent subject to conditions for the proposed Tekuha mine. It will still need permission from the Minister for Conservation for access across conservation land. A visitor from Korea has drowned while swimming at a spa park on the Waikato River at Taupo. Ngāti Tuwharetoa has placed a rahui on the river from Otumaheke downstream to Hooker Falls, saying its sympathy is with the family. And Auckland Council officials are recommending one of the cheaper options for the America's Cup Village, building 8 team bases across the Wynyard, Halsey Street and Hobson Wharves. The $120 million plan would add wharf space but make the smallest impact on the harbour. And that's the news.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. Let's turn to business news with Nona Peltier. On the other side of me, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, Nona, posted a record half-year profit, but a continuing legal battle. Boy, this has been going on and on.
Yeah,
taking some of the shine off, right?
Yeah, it's cost them $20 million the last financial year. This year, first half, $10 million. Making provision for another $10 million in the second half, and this is going to go on for some time, they say. So the market didn't like that.
The lawyers like it, right?
Yeah, but the market sure didn't. They marked this company down nearly 5%. So it finished down 63 cents to $13.25.
So $30 million over a year and a bit, year and a half, spent on legal fees or whatever.
Yeah.
But the fact is that it's just so protracted, there's still no resolution, right?
Absolutely. So,
okay.
Yeah. So it's going to take a while. I mean, the company is very confident or they wouldn't continue, obviously. And it's important for them because this is about their consumable items, which is what they're very profitable. So, no, it's important and they're going to carry on fighting. Absolutely.
Yeah. What was the number? What was the number in the half-year profit?
Oh, okay. Well,
have you got that?
yeah, I do have that.
It was just a big one.
It was actually pretty good. It was, where is the number? Oh, here it is. Up 4% to 81.3 million.
Yeah, okay. And that's record, isn't it? Record half-year.
It is record high, yeah.
Okay, Financial Markets Authority, the FMA, has launched an online tool to help KiwiSavers shop and compare. This is a good idea, isn't it?
Oh, it's actually a pretty darn good tool. I gave it a go. And I thought, on reflection, I might have to make some questions to my provider.
So what is it telling you? Is it telling you about fees?
It tells you both. Yeah. It tells you actually and a lot more than that. But what the basic sort of at a glance information gives you is a way of comparing the total return your fund is giving you and the proportion of that which is of fees. And it gives it in a nice bar graph so you can basically just cast your eye down the list and see where yours is rated, down the bottom or up the top.
Right.
And some of the funds, really are charging quite a lot of fees for very little return. So it's worth it if you are a Kiwi saver to go and have a look, or if you're not a Kiwi saver to go and have a look because you'll see what you're missing out on.
Okay. And you can switch funds. I mean, if
Absolutely,
you are simply
it's not
unhappy
that hard.
With,
no,
if
so you should
you're
definitely
unhappy with the performance or the fees, you can switch.
And that is what the Financial Markets Authority wants people to do. They want them to be shoppers when it comes to their KiwiSaver funds. So there you go.
Right. Recommended by Nona Peltier, which is a big tick.
Yeah, definitely go and do it. I would say anybody who has a KiwiSaver, definitely go and look. Okay, and you can find it on the FMA's site. It's called the KiwiSaver Tracker. It's pretty easy to look for.
Thanks, Nona. What happened on the markets?
Okay, so the NZX Top 50 Index ended down just 1 point, and that was dragged down by Fisher & Paykel to 8,088. And the dollar's trading...
1 point is hardly a drag, is it?
Well, it is if the rest of the markets in the global markets are up, right? Okay, right. Sorry, which is the case. I mean, I can tell you the story about corporate earnings on the global front. There's actually a lot of optimism about the global economy, and so we should have been way up. Never mind, we are down a point. The dollar is trading at 68 US cents, 90.2 Australian, and 51.3 pence.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. It's 21.5 to 6. A Dunedin man whose cancer spread whilst waiting for prostate cancer treatment. The Southern DHB says he's struggling to make ends meet while he faces a wait for ACC to settle his claim. Now, Stephen Hoffman is now terminally ill after his prostate cancer spread whilst he waited 10 months for treatment. The Southern DHB has accepted responsibility, but ACC had told Mr Hoffman his claim may take months to resolve despite 3 separate reports from DHB staff supporting his claim. So why the delay? How long will it be? And what does ACC have to say about all of this? Bridget Burke's report begins with Stephen Hoffman himself.
Expected to be seen within 6 weeks. Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, Mr. Hoffman's FSA, I think that's first appointment, was not delivered within this time frame, and he was not seen until a special clinic was arranged for overdue appointments over 5 months after his initial referral.
Dunedin man Stephen Hoffman reading excerpts from one of 3 reports written by Southern DHB to ACC. This one from the Urology Services Manager, James Goodwin.
This was a considerable delay on what Mr. Hoffman should have expected. Southern District Hospital Board is unable to offer a specific explanation for the cause of this delay in assessment, but it is systematic of the current difficulties with the service to manage the demand and provide services in a timely manner.
Mr. Hoffman was referred by his GP for urgent prostate treatment in September last year. It took 5 months for him to even see a specialist, and 10 months for him to get the surgery he urgently needed. In that time, his cancer spread. The Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Nigel Miller, told Checkpoint in September this year Mr. Hoffman's life had been shortened as a result of treatment delays.
We are deeply regretful and sorry, and it's a very a whole sad set of circumstances that a public health system should have this sort of failure in its provision of service.
A life-shortening failure?
It would appear so, yes.
Mr. Hoffman was told he may only have 5 years to live after he learned his cancer has spread and is now incurable due to the delay between his initial referral and surgery. This from a second report from Mr. Hoffman's specialist and one of the DHB's consultant urologists, Alistair Hepburn, to ACC.
The progression while waiting also made the surgery more difficult.
And finally, this from Sean Costello, a radiation oncologist from the Southern DHB, to ACC.
A prognosis which is now regarded by both his urologists and oncologists as unlikely to deliver a cure. In effect, therefore, this man has potentially lost his chance of being cured due to the delays in treatment.
The 62-year-old, who has been unable to work since his surgery in July, says he's now prone to infections while he undergoes intensive chemotherapy. While his wife still works full-time, he says the couple is now struggling to make ends meet.
There's no extra, we just got enough to basically buy the food and keep the house running. That's about how it is at the moment.
While the Southern DHB has accepted responsibility and written 3 reports in support of Mr. Hoffman's ACC claim, the couple has heard it could be 6 months before his claim is settled, and time isn't on Mr. Hoffman's side.
I just want my wage. I want what's equivalent of how we normally live. That's basically where we're at. It's hard to live when you're used to getting X amount and then effectively it gets basically chopped in half. And that's where we're at.
What did ACC talk to you about in terms of wanting extra time?
Well, originally they were looking for an extra 6 months from the 20th of November, being that the 20th of December was the original date that it was meant to be settled by. But they have wanted an extra 6 months, and that takes them out to 9 months from when the claim was put in.
But late this afternoon, ACC's Chief Customer Officer Mike Tully told Checkpoint the situation had changed, and he hoped to have Mr. Hoffman's treatment injury claim settled much faster.
Well, firstly, this is a terrible situation with Mr. Hoffman, and he really has our complete sympathy. We're anticipating that this claim is going to be accepted. First, we need to get a specialist's opinion, which we are expecting by the end of the week.
Mr. Tully said he was unsure if there would be other ACC claims from Southern DHB patients whose cancer may have progressed due to treatment delays.
It all depends on where was the person at the time of their claim, where were they at with their treatment and with their prognosis, and what, given the normal circumstance, would have happened. And that's each one requires, investigation to determine that.
ACC says Mr. Hoffman could expect a lump sum payment for his treatment injury and would be entitled to extra funding for home help. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Zimbabwe's increasingly isolated president could face impeachment within a matter of hours. Robert Mugabe, who's ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years, has ignored a deadline for him to stand down. The 93-year-old was sidelined by the military, expelled from his own party and put under house arrest last week. He now stands accused of being incapable of governing and letting his wife Grace usurp constitutional power. The ruling ZANU-PF party is due to begin the impeachment process tonight. Here's the BBC's Africa editor, Fergal Keane.
They are still the muscle behind the political manoeuvring. And when the generals speak, people and politicians listen. Tonight they hinted in a rare press conference that talks between Robert Mugabe and his would-be successor Emmerson Mnangagwa would happen soon.
The Zimbabwe Defence and Security Services are encouraged by new developments which include contact between the President and the former Vice President, Comrade Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is expected in the country shortly. Thereafter, the nation will be advised on the outcome of talks between the two.
A suggestion of talks and a roadmap has encouraged speculation that Robert Mugabe is starting to feel the political pressure, as piece by piece his power is shredded. His MPs gathered in Harare to begin the legal process of impeachment, removing him from office by parliamentary vote, and telling us it could happen in days.
We are expecting the motion to be moved tomorrow, the committee to be set up tomorrow, and hopefully by Wednesday, because the charges are so clear, we expect that by Wednesday we should be able to vote in Parliament.
He could be gone that soon?
Yes.
In the audience, a First Lady in waiting, Auxilia, wife of Emmerson Mnangagwa, whom the party wants as president. How are you? Will your husband be coming soon?
I have nothing. I'm not commenting on that one.
Everybody's waiting to see him.
I'm also waiting to see him as well.
Well, you can hear the emotions are building here, and this is a parliamentary party set on getting rid of Robert Mugabe. They share that ambition with the people of Zimbabwe, with the military.
Listen, when the people have spoken, that is it. The people are speaking in Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF is speaking, and we're good to go and good to roll.
But the generals are in a bind. They banked on Robert Mugabe caving in quickly. However, last night's rambling speech to the nation made no mention of resigning.
I will preside over its processes.
He appeared detached from reality, talking about presiding over a party congress. The question is why the generals allowed this to happen. Partly it's to do with a changed Africa. The old days of shooting leaders are gone. Human rights lawyer Beatrice Mtetwa was once persecuted by Robert Mugabe. She says the generals and Mr. Mnangagwa want to be seen to be acting constitutionally.
Zimbabwean culture has always been that you make the law, you justify your actions on the basis that this is the law. And this is in line with the Zimbabwean way of doing things. Give it respectability by making it law, however bad it is.
The talks mooted tonight might yet end this crisis, but the people are ready for impeachment. And that legal path is about ensuring the legitimacy of those who rule Zimbabwe next.
That's the BBC's Fergal Keane reporting from Harare. Britain's Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip have gone platinum, and to mark their 70th wedding anniversary, the Queen appointed the Duke of Edinburgh, her husband of course, a Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order for services to the Sovereign, which is a unique kind of anniversary present, but then they're a unique kind of couple. Here's David Doyle from Reuters.
Heiress to the throne and the Duke of Edinburgh were proclaimed man and wife.
It's been 70 years since Queen Elizabeth, then Princess Elizabeth, left Westminster Abbey with her new husband Philip. A day of pomp and pageantry, cheering crowds, an ornate procession through the streets of London and ringing bells. And the bells ringing again on Monday for Elizabeth and Philip's platinum anniversary. Westminster Abbey's bells chiming for more than 3 hours. Though the couple are marking the celebration in a much quieter fashion. The royals, both great-great-grandchildren of Queen Victoria, have opted for a small family party at Windsor Castle, the monarch's home to the west of London. No public events are planned to celebrate the marriage of the 91-year-old Queen and the 96-year-old Duke of Edinburgh, who retired from active public life in August. A contrast to the silver, golden and diamond wedding anniversaries. Their 1947 marriage took place just 2 years after the end of the Second World War and was broadcast to 200 million people across the world by radio. Thousands camped out overnight at Buckingham Palace to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. And it was described by former Prime Minister Winston Churchill as a flash of colour on the hard road we have to travel. A moment of light after years of profound darkness.
The bells of joy rang out in every heart.
70 years on, they're still together. Quite a remarkable story. David Doyle from Reuters. Homelessness has once again been thrust into the spotlight in Christchurch after one of the city's trams was stopped and its driver abused over the weekend. Workers on New Regent Street, a central city tourist spot, say it's not an isolated incident, but as Logan Church reports, the homeless themselves are fed up with having the finger pointed at them.
Christchurch's New Regent Street, bustling with locals and tourists. Every weekend the street is full of people, but last weekend a tram full of tourists was stopped by a man who appeared to be homeless. He verbally abused the driver when asked to move. Some nearby business owners are concerned.
I saw them today around the press building and that's scary because they're quite aggressive.
The business owner has asked to remain anonymous because she fears being targeted by some of the people she believes are causing problems. She wants to extend her business hours during summer, but is worried about the safety of her staff and customers. She says problems with people living on the street are not new.
A drunk homeless yelling in the store, asking for food.
Inside the store?
Inside the store. Very aggressive as well. The police came that time, but it took a while.
The tram company, Wood Scenic Line, didn't return calls today. But RNZ understands there's been several other incidents, including a driver who had to stop his tram to remove a beggar's blankets from the tracks. That beggar then verbally abused him in front of his passengers. But today I spoke to one homeless man, Tepe, and his niece, Benita, who believe they're unfairly targeted.
It's just random people doing it. It might be a drunk going along there next to a bank, they're jumping on the tram. And then next one, oh, it's the homeless dude.
They always point it at the homeless.
And always point the finger at us. So like, if someone done something in town, they come straight to me. Oh, you done this to me. And I go, well, what have I done?
Chris Chamberlain is the pastor of Oxford Terrace Baptist Church, a short walk from New Regent Street. His church offers free drop-in dinners for the homeless, as well as people who can't afford to buy food. He says while some homeless people do cause problems, so do people from all walks of life.
There's always a bit of antisocial behaviour from every sector of society. So I don't think it's fair to target the homeless. You only have to go downtown on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night and you'll find some very, very well-heeled people behaving badly.
Chris Chamberlain says the tram incident highlights the need to get people living on the street into homes.
Some of these people fall into those categories of needing housing, social services, mental health care, and those things are really quite significantly stretched in Christchurch.
In Christchurch for Checkpoints, Logan Church.
Let's head up the country from Christchurch to Taranaki, where a stoush has broken out at an exclusive New Plymouth development over a for rent sign. A property management company says it's been told it can't display the sign in the linked suburb because it lowers the tone. But a residents group says the company simply failed to follow the rules. Our reporter Robin Martin went out to the links to see what all the fuss is about.
Stacey Tancred, a property manager at Pukeko Rentals, got a surprise when she went to check on a brand new 4-bedroom home in the Bell Block development. Her for rent sign had been removed and tossed beside the garage. She put it back up, but it was gone again the next day. Ms Tancred said things only got worse when she went door knocking to see what had happened.
We just got arrogance, really, and, in my opinion, snobbery. Resistance.
What did they say?
Well, some of the comments from some of the members of the association were that they don't want tenants in here because they'll bring down the community.
Stacey Tancred admits she had unwittingly broken rules around the displaying of signs and not sought an exemption from the Homeowners Association.
There's a section 14 in there that says no signs are to be erected of any advertisement or any hoarding or commercial nature. My reaction to that was, there's for sale signs, so why can't there be for rent signs? I actually felt quite gutted, really. You know, it's not... I believe that any sign's a good sign.
Ken Hargraves is a member of the Homeowners Association Committee, and he lives in the quiet lane where the wannabe rental is situated. He makes no bones about it. He removed the for rent sign.
Well, the problem with the sign was there was no permission granted in the first place. And we've never had any rental signs around here that we've ever seen. There's for sale signs and builders signs, but everybody has to gain permission beforehand. I know some of them haven't, but the rules are the rules.
Mr. Hargraves insists he's got nothing against rentals per se.
People don't drive around here looking for a house to rent. They'll drive around looking to buy. The house across the road on the corner and the next one are both rentals. Didn't put rental signs up, they just rented them. There's something like maybe most probably about 15 or 20 rentals in here, so nobody's got an issue with rentals.
Out on the streets of the links, named after the world's great golf courses no less, knowledge of the development's rules is patchy. Ange isn't clear on signs, but knows she has to keep an eye on the lawns.
Well, I guess in the links they have their own rules and regulations as well. Like you can't have certain height of the houses, can't be any taller, or you have to have a fence, not fence, but manicured backyard and things like that have to be managed and things like that.
Gail Brady simply has more pressing things to worry about than signs.
I really don't care if they have signs or not. It doesn't bother me. I mean, if that's the rule, they should follow the rule, but I don't really have a problem with signs.
Adam knows not to park the mobile home out front, but he's still getting his head round the rules.
I know of there is, but I haven't really read the pack, if you know what I mean. There was a lot of stuff in there.
Simon Habib reckons vehicles emblazoned with signs are a no-no.
My understanding was quite vaguely was that it was only, I think it was sign written or branded cars that you couldn't have parked out on the driveway to see, or maybe it was on the street at all.
In the meantime, Ms Tancred has been reduced to displaying her for rent sign through a window that does not look out onto the street, but out onto the private right-of-way. Ironically, one of the few people who can see it now is near neighbour Mr Hargraves. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahihahi, ko Robin Martin aho.
We want to apologise to anyone who felt that Robin's frequent use of the term for rent lowered the programme's tone. It's 4 minutes to 6. We turn now to a delightful story out of Marlborough. In Picton, they're getting a flash new library, which everyone is stoked about, but it does mean all the books have to be moved from the old library to the new one, which is slow, labour-intensive, and, well, kind of tiring work. And then some genius came up with the idea of asking locals to borrow as many books as they liked before the old library closed and return them to the new library. Thus, library users also became book movers. So delighted were we by the simple brilliance of the scheme, we called Marlborough District Library's manager, Glenn Webster, and asked him to tell us about it.
It was one of the staff's idea. You know, the more the people could help us take the books, the fewer we would have to take ourselves. So the suggestion was that, you know, come in, well, we're going to be closed for 10 days anyway, so, you know, come and grab some books, you know, take as many as you like. Take the more the merrier, because the more that you take, the less we're going to have to shift. We've got a collection of 18,000 items, and so it was just a great idea if the public could come and support us by taking books home, and then they'll be able to read them, enjoy them, and then drop them back to the new library when it opens on the 29th.
And were people coming in and saying that was what they were doing?
Yeah, definitely. People on Sunday was our last day, and people said, look, I've chosen the biggest book I could find. I don't know anything about the subject, but I'm helping you out, so I'm just going to enjoy this book at home while you're closed. And I've purposely chosen the biggest books I can find.
Well, what are some famously big books? Can you recall them offhand?
Well, I wasn't here, but I think that, I mean, there's some beautiful travel books and biographies. You know, there's some of those very large
weighty
biographies
go
out here. Yeah. So, you know, the normal size of 2 normal books. So, you know, that's what people purposely looked for, so that they were, you know, as they felt they were helping us out.
So some people have borrowed books from the old library and will return them to the new library. The books that haven't been borrowed, you are moving them, and this is just so delightful. What you've got? Tell me, you've gotten a big moving firm and trucks and all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, no, that's far too easy, John. No, the thing, because our new facility is built right next door to our old facility, so we decided we've got staff from the District Library in Blenheim helping the Picton staff, and we're putting them on trolleys and trolling them out. Well, it was supposed to be out the front door into the front door of the new facility, but we're still waiting for the concrete to dry. So we've had to use the back entrance, and so we put carpet across the car park and had a digger in to graduate the transition between the two buildings, and we're just trolleying them down into the new building.
And everyone who has ever been to a library knows those trolleys, right? So they are the trolleys you use when people return books to take them back to the shelves.
Yeah, that's the one.
And so you were moving one library to another library using those trolleys.
Yeah, so we also have a couple of flat bed trolleys that we're putting bins on top of, so just to sort of help with the larger items. But it's working really well.
That's Glenn Webster. Someone contacted us to say that it was done in Littleton as they moved post-earthquake. What a brilliant idea, encouraging people to take books out from the old library and return them to the new one. Lots of feedback tonight. We just love your company. Thank you. Hi, John. No doubt the Auckland Council will be flying someone to Europe in business class as part of the expenditure review rationale to find out how the French or Italians manage their expenditure. Thank you, Brett.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. A former Labour MP, Sue Moroney, says she warned the Waikato District Health Board chairman about Nigel Murray before he was hired. Documents released by the DHB show the former chief executive spent $218,000 on expenses in his 3 years at the DHB. He resigned early last month under an agreement with the DHB. The DHB chair, Bob Simcock, said yesterday he was not responsible for travel that he had not been given information about. But Sue Moroney told Checkpoint she warned Mr Simcock in 2014 not to employ Dr Murray, and he must now take responsibility.
It was Bob Simcock's job to know about what was going on. It's really frustrating for me to learn subsequently that within months of Bob Simcock and I having that conversation, that Nigel Murray was already flouting the policies and procedures of the DHB by claiming more in transfer accommodation costs than what he was entitled to do.
Sue Moroney. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment says it's moving swiftly to change fire rules because buildings were being designed that did not protect the public enough. Councils have to get designers to redo their work to ensure a building is safe. Phil Pennington reports.
The change this Friday will shift some major buildings, such as large shopping malls, high-rises and care homes, out of one set of fire design rules and into another that entail more checks by councils and fire brigades. Fire and Emergency New Zealand says the Grenfell Tower fire disaster in London has highlighted the need to be extra vigilant with fire safety of large buildings. Some fire engineers, however, say the rule change won't improve safety and they're upset at being given just a few days' warning of the change. The ministry says it consulted widely this year, but no consensus was reached and a transition period is not necessary. This is Phil Pennington.
Officials have been asked to review whether merging two of Christchurch's proposed anchor projects, a metro sports facility and a stadium, would better serve locals. The Christchurch Rebuild Minister Megan Woods today revealed the planned sports facility, which includes a 50-metre swimming pool, netball courts and a gym, is facing a $75 million budget blowout. Dr Woods says it's due to a price increase by the preferred contractor for the design and build of the facility and a risk escalation component. She's told the government rebuild organisation Otakaro to design the facility in-house and prepare a build-only contract. Officials will also look into the benefits of combining part or all of the facility with the planned stadium. The number of transport agency staff earning over $100,000 leapt by 33% in just 1 year. In the 2015-2016 financial year, 555 staff were earning six-figure salaries, up from 418 staff the year before. The agency says it changed the way it calculates salary increases that year, lifting more staff above the 100,000 threshold. It says it also hired another 70 staff in 2015. A research fellow at the New Zealand Initiative, Sam Warburton, says that still doesn't account for the 33% jump and says the agency will be more transparent.
Staff numbers increased by 70, yes, that's right. That's the 5% increase in total staff numbers. But in terms of the 100,000, there's been a 30% increase. And even there, They're saying that there's 70 more people that have been hired, but they've been very vague about how many of those people are on $100,000.
Researcher Sam Warburton. The Taxpayers Union says the increase is quite extraordinary. A proposed coal mine at Mount Tekuha on the west coast has won resource consent. A hearing began in September for the mine, which Stevenson Mining wants to open about 12 kilometres up the Buller River from Westport. The company says it would employ 58 people and mine 250,000 tonnes of coal annually, much of it to be exported for steel making. Stevenson argued the mine made good economic sense, but objectors such as Forest and Bird and Coal Action Network Aotearoa said it would be environmentally harmful. Both the Buller District Council and West Coast Regional Council have granted resource consent, but the mine will still need permission from the Minister for Conservation for access across conservation land. It also faces a hearing in the High Court in Christchurch over conflicting pieces of legislation that affect the proposal. Spark has closed 6 stores because of earthquake risks. The telecommunications company says a seismic assessment of all its retail stores has found some don't meet its own health and safety standards. These stores are in Te Awamutu, Whakatane, Timaru, Ashburton, Tauranga and at Lynn Mall in Auckland. Spark says it's working with landlords to either fix the buildings or find alternative locations. It's 6:05. The former America's Cup skipper Chris Dixon says the foiling monohull design is a huge leap technologically for sailing. The America's Cup holders Team New Zealand have announced that the boats for the 2021 event will be AC-75s, with the competition returning to monohulls rather than catamarans. Dixon says the design is based on the single-handed 3-metre-long Moth class, in which America's Cup helmsman Peter Burling won a world championship.
This is basically a big boat version of that, and previously I've always understood that we didn't possess the technology to make big monohulls foil, but Team New Zealand designers have gone a step further, and this is a first for this planet, foiling monohulls on a large scale. They're going to be very impressive.
Chris Dixon. The New Zealand women's hockey coach Mark Hager is hoping his players are feeling the pain after a disastrous start to the World League finals in Auckland. The Black Sticks, who finished second in the same event 2 years ago and were fourth at the Rio Olympics, have lost all 3 of their pool games and now play Germany in the quarterfinals. Hager says he wants to force a reaction from the players.
I would like to see a hurt that's fired them up to come out and prove that they are good hockey players and not just, drop their heads and drop their bundle and give the game up.
Mark Hager. And the New Zealand cyclist Zach Williams has finished top qualifier for the final of tonight's 1,000-metre time trial at the Oceania Track Champs in Cambridge, breaking the New Zealand all-comers record previously held by London Olympic medalist Simon van Velthoven. And that is the news.
Tonight on Nights, the smart talkers at the Auckland Museum take on privilege. Trevor Reekie meets the Warsaw Village Band. This week's pundit, the left of centre Brian Roper, considers the impact of Lennon 100 years after the revolution, while Nick Bollinger assesses Bob Dylan's gospel years. Because you got to serve somebody. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday for Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taihape, fine apart from a few isolated showers. Waitomo to Horowhenua and the Kapiti Coast, fine weather. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloudy and a few light showers, clearing tomorrow evening. Wellington and Wairarapa mostly fine, isolated light showers tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, fine spells, a few light showers mainly about the ranges. Western and Fiordland fine spells, isolated showers developing about the ranges in the afternoon and evening. For Canterbury, Otago and Southland mainly fine but cloudy periods near the coast. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with a few showers. RNZ National, it's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
And Anna Thomas doing a brilliant job reading the news. Thank you so much, Anna. Lovely to have you with us. There's been an explosion in 6-figure salaries at the Transport Agency, and an economic think tank, the New Zealand Initiative, has been left puzzled by the agency's explanations for the 6-figure salary boom. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
In the 2015-16 financial year, the number of staff at the transport agency who were earning more than $100,000 surged 33%. A research fellow at the New Zealand Initiative, Sam Warburton, says it's quite a jump.
There's been an increase in the number of employees earning over $100,000 per annum from 418 to 555, so 137 increase, or about 33%. When we look at overall staff numbers only went up 5%. The increase is big, and it needs an explanation.
The transport agency declined to make anyone available for an interview. But in a statement, it says it changed the way it calculates salary increases in 2015, and therefore more staff crossed into the $100,000 threshold. The agency says it also hired an extra 70 full-time staff that year, some to run the growing state highway network program. But Mr Warburton doesn't believe this explains the boom.
Staff numbers increased by 70, yes, that's right. That's the 5% increase in total staff numbers. But in terms of the 100,000, there's been a 30% increase. And even there, they're saying that there's 70 more people that have been hired, but they've been very vague about how many of those people are on $100,000.
Jordan Williams from the Taxpayers Union says the leap in six-figure salaries at the transport agency is quite extraordinary, but he expects them to fall now.
Now, with the changed priorities of the new government, we're expecting next year for these salaries to reduce, these high salaries, because they'll no longer be necessary. And I think that the Chief Executive needs to make the undertaking that that's what's going to happen.
In 2012, the Transport Agency had 294 staff earning over $100,000. This year, it has 562 staff. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
The former America's Cup skipper Chris Dixon says the new foiling monohull yacht design, which was released today by Team New Zealand, will help make the event more relevant to ordinary sailors. Team New Zealand revealed the design for the 2021 event will be AC-75 foiling monohulls rather than the cats of the past few events. Foiling is exciting, but back from 2 hulls to 1. Its design coordinator, Dan Bernasconi, says feedback from other syndicates recommended a return to monohulls. And Chris Dixon told our sports editor, Stephen Hewson, he agrees with that move.
They look absolutely incredible. After the last America's Cup foiling multi-hulls, I'm sure we all thought that would be a hard act to follow, but it seems to me that what they've come up with is a fantastic boat, incredibly innovative, and it's going to be exciting racing.
Was there any word in the yachting fraternity that this was what was on the table?
There was, and the whispers started coming out a couple of months ago, or 6 weeks ago probably. And but I heard the whispers. I saw some early sketches, and what they've come up with has impressed me beyond what the rumours I'd heard. So I think they've done incredible work to come up with what they have, and I think it's going to encourage a lot of teams to come.
So a boat like this doesn't exist at the moment?
Nothing like this exists on that scale. We have the little 3-metre-long single-handed foiling moths, of which Peter Burling has been world champion in the past, and this is basically a big boat version of that. And previously, I've always recently understood that we didn't possess the technology to make big monohulls foil, but Team New Zealand designers have obviously gone a step further, and this is a first for this planet. Foiling monohulls on a large scale. They're going to be very impressive.
What is it that excites you the most about them?
What excites me is the fact that 99% of the boats in the world are monohull, of sailing yachts, of cruising yachts, of pleasure yachts. Monohulls are the practical boats out there. They always have been, and that's what most of the world knows. And to have the amount of innovation they've got in a monohull just says to the rest of the world that, hey, this is something you know. The whole world knows monohulls. Every yacht club, every sailor in the world knows monohulls, and it will encourage teams to compete. And if the more teams come, the better the event, and the better that is for everyone.
Chris, do you think we're going to see a return to more tacking duels, more starting manoeuvres type of thing, rather than maybe flat-out drag racing?
We saw the starting manoeuvres start to creep into the last Cup, even though they were very complicated multi-hulls. But the America's Cup is match racing. That's 2 boats in the race. All you got to do is beat the other boat. And staying between your opposition and the finish line is the name of the game. and monohulls that are manoeuvrable will lend themselves more to those boat-on-boat tactics. So I think they're going to be an exciting boat to watch. They're going to be an exciting boat to develop. They're going to be a challenge for the teams. And if they've got the crew work, the Jenicas going up and down, the grinding comes back, and match racing back on top as well, it all adds up to being an exciting event to follow. And if it's exciting to follow, it means it's exciting to compete. More teams, better media, good television coverage. It just makes for a far better event.
Chris Dixon speaking to our sports editor, Stephen Hewson. Auckland homeowners basking in their increased property valuations should keep their excitement well and truly in check because they may already be out of date. Individual property valuations were released by the Auckland Council yesterday for the first time in 3 years, prompting a frenzy of sticky beating with average values in the region rising 46%. And while this means some homeowners will face a bigger rates bill next year, property watchers say they may be doing so even as the housing market cools in Auckland. Anusha Bradley reports.
The release of the new valuations has sent a record 58,000 homeowners and nosy neighbours scrambling to TradeMe's property website to see how much their home might be worth. But TradeMe's head of property, Nigel Jeffries, says some might be disappointed.
The RVs assume that it's freehold land, so generally leasehold land will sell slightly cheaper than freehold, so it pays to bear in mind as well. The other thing is the timing. So the RVs got set back in July, and there has been some movement in Auckland since that time. Auckland as a whole has been really flat since July, but there are particular suburbs or particular areas of Auckland that perhaps have had a quicker slowdown than other areas.
Bruce Patton, a mortgage advisor at Loan Market, says some valuations do appear to be unrealistically high.
We're already seeing scenarios where, we've got new CV come in at 2 million plus, but the house is realistically under 2 million. I had one client who texted me yesterday to say my value's gone up 214%. I would struggle to believe that will be an accurate reflection of their true value unless it was grossly undervalued. In 2014, the values had increased in that 6 months, whereas in 2017, the values, if anything, have been stagnant or gone backwards. So in a lot of cases, people might get valuations and think that the house is worth that when in actual fact it may be worth less.
According to the Real Estate Institute, the median Auckland house price has actually risen 2.4% since July, but the rate of growth is slowing. A spokesperson for the Institute, Dee Crooks, says sale prices and council valuations don't always stack up, and it's best to seek individual advice from an agent.
So look, over the last 3 years, we've seen sales prices for the Auckland region increase by 35%, whereas the CV for the Auckland region has increased by 43% over that same period. But look, what we would point out is that, as is always the case with statistics, is that it's only one indicator of what your property might be worth.
Loan Market's Bruce Patton agrees, and he says the new council valuations won't be much help to anyone wanting to borrow from a bank.
In this case, the banks will largely ignore these values. What they've moved towards in recent years is doing up-to-date market analysis values through the likes of CoreLogic. So I think from a person's perspective, they can largely ignore them as a means of going to their bank and borrowing against them. So believing what you see on a piece of paper from the council when nobody's visited your property is totally misleading. If you want to get an accurate valuation, call a valuer or get a real estate agent to come and look at your house.
The council says homeowners with increases of more than 46% are likely to face a higher rates bill when the rates are set in the middle of next year. And it says this doesn't mean it will be collecting more money in total, as valuations are used to work out each ratepayer's share of the total amount. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
6:18. 3 days after the shooting of a Wellington taxi driver, police say the man responsible is armed and dangerous, and they're urging Dylan Nuku to hand himself in. Alem Tessima, who was shot in the shoulder, says while he was happy police visited him this morning, the incident has frightened him so much he'll never drive a taxi again. Charlie Drever reports.
We believe Dylan is in Wellington here. We've been in contact with family members who are willing to assist us, and we are appealing to them to keep the communication going with Dylan and appeal to him to come forward and speak to police.
Detective Senior Sergeant Warwick McKee this afternoon urging Dylan Niku to hand himself in. Police say the 26-year-old, whose Facebook page brags about graduating from both Auckland and Rimutaka prisons, is likely armed.
We're warning people not to approach Dylan, but any sightings or any information in regards to his whereabouts, if they could, those people could contact police on 111 or the 0800 Crime Stoppers number and provide that advice to us.
Back home recovering after surgery to his broken shoulder, Alem Tisima sits with his arm in a sling, surrounded by fellow taxi drivers and members of the Ethiopian community who have been taking care of him. He says he worked hard for 15 years to be a good taxi driver.
I learned very hard, to know the suburb and the street names, Wellington, very well, really. I know where to go. I'm an experienced guy, and I talk nicely with the people, the customers. But I see people, weekend, and if you work Saturday night, some people, I don't mind. $10, $15, people running. I never chase them, never.
But now he says he's unable to get back behind the wheel.
It's very scary now to do this job. Yeah.
Well, what do you think you might do now?
I don't know. I can't tell right now, but I see how it go. First in my house, and then I think about it.
Mr. Tisima says other drivers are also feeling apprehensive.
They don't drive on night shift because they say life is important rather than the money.
The news of this has not only shocked the taxi driving community, but locals as well. One Stone Street resident says the news came as a shock and wasn't aware of what happened until much later.
One of my sons told me late the next day. But there was a disturbance here after that incident. About 2:15, there was somebody walking around banging on the doors and windows here. Yeah, I never rang the cops then because I didn't sort of think it was serious enough to ring the cops.
He says he's lived on the street for more than 3 years and it's usually as quiet as a cemetery. And while the police say assaults on taxi drivers are unusual in Wellington, ACC figures show 20 claims were made last year by taxi drivers and others in the sector, such as those working for rental car companies. But the figure is lower than the previous 3 years, which the Taxi Federation put down to the wide use of cameras. That comes as little comfort to Alam, though, who doesn't want anyone else to get injured or worse. For Checkpoint, I'm Charlie Drever.
Earlier in the programme tonight, we looked at the budget blowout for the Metro Sports Centre in Christchurch, part of the blueprint, of course, announced in 2012, the rebuild of the city, one of the anchor projects. The new government says is now $75 million over its original budget. Of course, completion date was meant to be 2016 last year. Construction hasn't even begun yet. So we wanted to talk to Jerry Brownlee about this, and he has, as he always does, I think, every time we contact him to appear on Checkpoint, declined our invitation to appear. It's 22 minutes past 6. A question mark hangs over the future of the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and a political crisis which could push Germans back to the polls. Mrs Merkel has failed to put together a three-party coalition government after the Liberal Free Democrats walked out of a negotiation with her Christian Democrats and the Greens. The key sticking point, apparently, immigration. Mrs Merkel says she would rather have a snap election than lead a minority government. Here's the BBC's Katja Adler from Berlin.
Ask a European about strong and stable government, and here their finger will point. Germany. A country proud of its post-war political stability and careful consensus building. Until the day Angela Merkel won the dubious honour of becoming Germany's first leader since World War II to fail to form a government. But it's not over yet. Coalition talks have collapsed for now, but Mrs Merkel is nothing if not a seasoned political fighter. She's been German Prime Minister for 3 terms already. Would she consider giving up now?
No,
resigning was never an option. I've always said that I'm ready to serve Germany for a further 4 years. This coalition failed in its negotiating talks, but that does not mean that I will forget the promise I made.
Earlier today, Mrs Merkel met the German president to discuss the what's next. New attempts at government forming or fresh elections both know carry a real risk the far right could benefit.
This is an unprecedented situation in modern Germany. This goes beyond party interests. Concern may well start to grow outside Germany too, if politicians don't live up to their responsibility in this, Europe's biggest and economically strongest nation.
So what does this all mean? Well, it depends who you speak to. Here in Germany tonight, the biggest question is, can Angela Merkel survive this, the biggest political crisis of her career? Political upheaval in the German chancellery also has repercussions elsewhere. Take the EU, for example, feeling pretty bullish of late and planning reform of the Eurozone, of asylum policy and closer defence cooperation as well, all with Germany in the driving seat. And what about Brexit? A source close to Angela Merkel insisted to me today Germany's attitude to Brexit would remain unchanged despite coalition woes. But is that realistic?
With her not in the game at the moment, busy, distracted, keeping her own act together, trying to form a government, Germany adrift, well, the impact on Brexit is short-term, that nothing moves. You know, they can talk whatever they want in Brussels, the negotiators on both sides, but they're all waiting for the signal from Berlin.
Angela Merkel promised Germany a new government for Christmas. That now seems more than unlikely. The irony of the political crisis here is it comes at a time this country, economically, has never had it so good. And when Europe, faced with international uncertainties, relies more than ever on stable German leadership.
Katja Adler with that report from Berlin. Let's end tonight with some sport. Rugby, record numbers of people are playing it in this country, more than ever before, aided by a really rapid growth in the number of girls and women playing rugby. But more and more people around the world are diving into an aquatic version of the sport. Underwater rugby was invented in Germany. That was not an intentional segue from the last story about Angela Merkel, more than 50 years ago, and is now played in more than 24 countries. With the increasing popularity of new and creative ways to work out, fans of the game are hoping it will encourage more people to tip their toes in the water and give it a try. Why would you? Well, our US correspondent William Denslow answers that from Newark, New Jersey.
Football may be known as the beautiful game, but underwater rugby will take your breath away.
I come from Colombia, and it's really important for some kids to become part of the sport.
Juan Pablo Riamana is the interim coach of the New Jersey Hammerheads. He says the sport is a great way to get your kicks.
It just starts with the fact that you don't have air. You know what I mean? From there, everything is twice as complicated. Then you have the contact part of it. It's in the water, so it's a different type of contact, you know what I mean? So all of that gives you a rush of excitement, and it's pretty cool to feel it.
The Hammerheads formed in 2006 and now have about 35 members. Twice a week, they put on their flippers, snorkels and masks and meet at a pool in Newark, New Jersey to practice. There are currently 7 teams in the US, and those here hope the game will continue to rise in popularity. Some say the best thing about the sport is the fact that it's completely three-dimensional. You can tackle and be tackled from any angle. From the surface, you can see a lot of splashing as players come up for air. But below the surface, the game comes alive. Unlike the version of rugby played on land, there are no tries, scrums or lineouts here. But as the director of underwater rugby in the US, Rolexi Pinson, says, there is certainly tackling.
You have 2 baskets at the bottom. You have 2 teams of 6 in the water and 6 outside. They are free shoving. The idea is to put the ball in the other team's basket. If you have the ball, anyone from the other team can grab you. But as soon as you let the ball go, they have to let you go.
New Jersey Hammerheads player Marco De Castro says that it's not as dangerous as it might seem, but concedes it's both a mental and physical workout.
To really keep myself calm under stressful situations, especially when you're not able to breathe, and at the same time people are trying to tackle you, trying to take the ball away from you. And that's basically what really attracts me to the sport.
Underwater rugby is now being played in around 30 nations, with the next World Championship set for Austria in 2019. It's a game still very much below the surface of the sporting mainstream, but players here are optimistic it can keep making waves on the global sports scene.
William Denslow, if he was fined $1 for every water pun he used in that track, we'd all be rich. Lots of feedback tonight. We're very grateful for it. Hi, John. The Midas touch feeling among Auckland property owners is scarcely reminiscent, scarily reminiscent of the Midas touch feeling among share punters in early 1987. The Transport Agency says Germany has all these highly paid executives and the road toll keeps climbing. Go figure. Very good insight on that over the weekend, which is available online. How sad for the Dunedin Urology paper. The SDHB should be ashamed. I'm really puzzled, though. Why is the Accident Compensation Corp covering incompetence? Well, they say they're not, and they say they are acting fast. We will keep an eye on this. And NCEA Maths, my daughter and all her friends horrified by Monday's exam. And these are students who've been achieving well all year. Bitterly disappointed for all maths students to be blindsided in this way. We're supposed to be encouraging a love of maths. Thank you for your feedback and thank you for being with us on behalf of our fantastic team. Have a great evening. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines. At 6:30, a former Labour MP, Sue Moroney, says she warned the Waikato District Health Board chairman about the former Chief Executive Nigel Murray before he was hired. Dr Murray's expenses spending is being investigated. The government is moving swiftly to change fire rules because buildings were being designed that did not protect the public enough. The number of transport agency staff earning over $100,000 leapt by 33% in just 1 year. And a proposed coal mine at Mount Te Kuha on the west coast has won resource consent. Our next news and weather is at 7.
One-time teenage country star Taylor Swift continues her quest for pop world domination. She's got a new album and whatever it is, it's not country. I'm Nick Bollinger and